Hey folks, welcome back to my Rustic Tiny. For those who are new, I'm a complete beginner building the DIY tiny house of my dreams. In this video, I'm going to be talking about adding window bucks, 2-inch window bucks, to all of my window openings before the window install, and a little bit of adding liquid flashing to that at the end. And so the reason I need 2-inch window bucks is because I'm planning on adding a layer of continuous insulation all along the outside of my house to all of the wall sheathing. And this does a couple of different good things. It adds to the longevity of the house. It warms up the wall sheathing to help prevent condensation underneath that and causing moisture issues. It prevents thermal bridging. It adds to the R value of the walls. These are only 2x4 walls, and so an extra 2 inches of insulation adds a good amount of extra value. I think it's R8 maybe that it adds to the R15 walls, something like that. And it generally creates a more airtight, sealed, efficient, warm home. So window bucks will be used to bump out the window 2 inches to the plane of where the 2 inches of continuous insulation will be. And for that, I couldn't use 2x6s because the actual width of those is 5.5. And so with the thickness of the 2x4 walls and then the sheathing, the wall sheathing on top of that, and then the 2 inches of continuous insulation outside of that, 5.5 inches wouldn't have been enough. So I had to rip down 2x8s to exactly 6 inches. And those are what I used. So this video will be about showing how I made those, how I installed them, and also a little bit of how I added liquid flashing to the outside of them as the first step in sealing them before the windows go in. The liquid sealing wasn't necessarily needed because I was planning on doing the zip tape after that. But since I'm so much a beginner, I just wanted to take as many steps as I could to create a very airtight and leak-proof house. And windows, if they're not done correctly, can be a very big trouble spot for moisture, leaks, rot, things like that. So this is a router bit kit that my dad had. Somebody had given it to him a couple years back, and I wasn't quite sure which was the best one to use for the window opening, so I kind of just chose this very basic one. I'm not sure if it was the best one or not, but this seems to do the trick for making a very clean cut around the sheathing from the outside of the house. This part right here would butt up against the wall framing, and then this part would cut out the sheathing even with that. I learned about the router bit method of cutting the window openings while I was taking the Windows course at Hammerstone this past summer. This method does create a very uniform and clean edge to the window openings, but it does generate quite a lot of dust, so I should have been using a mask during this process. I also found it somewhat difficult to use the router, especially when I had to reach over my head and move side to side when cutting the loft windows, so I did switch to a slightly different method a little bit later in this video. So you can see that when I use the router bit, all the corners are going to be slightly rounded on the sheathing, so to square them up, I'm going to use a reciprocating saw and just kind of bring it down on that and move it back and forth a bit on each of the corners. Because I'm going to be adding more liquid flashing around this opening once the window bucks are in, I'm not sure if the flashing will stick to this stuff that has sawdust all over it. So just in case, I'm going to clean it off with some alcohol, and also on the tape a little bit to help the flashing stick to this tape. And just kind of generally clean it off from all the dustiness for better adhesion. These are the 2x8s that my dad and I had ripped down to 6 inches wide for the window bucks. So here they are all ripped down, and now I'm cutting them to length for inside the window openings. So I have the window bucks for this window all set in place. They're not nailed in yet. They stick 2 inches out from the side to match up with the 2 inches of exterior insulation I'll be adding. And on this sill piece, I got the table saw at a 5-degree angle, and I beveled the edge of that for better drainage when water hits it to run off. And I'll repeat this process on all of the window bucks. Once I nail this in place, I'll start adding the liquid flashing to it. So this is the table saw setup for that 5-degree angle on the bottom sill. That's set to 5 degrees right there. Careful planning was needed at the initial stage of drawing out the window framing on graph paper. I knew that I was going to be using window bucks, but they wouldn't immediately be added at the time that I was building out the walls and framing around the actual windows. So that meant I needed to make space for them before the fact by making each of the rough openings an extra 3 inches wider along the height and width of each of the openings to account for the 1.5 inch thickness of each of the ripped 2x8 pieces that would be added along both sides, the top and the bottom. This came after the point of deciding the final size of each of the windows I wanted and determining the rough opening that was needed. Only at that point was I able to add in the window bucks to those drawings. All these times you see me reaching outside with the tape measure, making sure that the outer edge of the bucks is exactly 2 inches from the surface of the sheathing. So getting closer to the time when I knew I would be adding the window openings and preparing to install the windows, I did more research on flashing methods, and that's when I found out about liquid flashing. And in those videos, or even in just the comments on the videos, I learned that it's a smarter idea to not rely completely on the efficacy of the zip tape itself, or any flashing tape really, to not rely just on that as protection for your windows, because the tape can always fail and moisture can always get in through the seams. And so in some of those videos, they suggested that liquid flashing was a lot more thorough and durable and fail-proof in order to really completely seal up all of the crevices and seams around the windows. So I went to my local hardware store and I found some fairly affordable liquid flashing that was basically the same price as any of the other caulking or construction adhesives, and it was a lot cheaper than the Zip liquid flashing, which is about $30 a tube. I found some that was about $10-ish a tube for this very similar looking liquid flashing that could be used on the roof. It remained flexible, high temperature tolerance, and so that's what I used as the first layer around the window bucks. Then I would use the zip tape, and then those two things added in combination would create a fairly foolproof way to protect my windows. So here's this window buck after flashing it. I tried to get into all of the spaces where the buck sticks out past the sheathing, all the way around on this side, getting into the gaps That's where the different parts of the window buck meet in those little gaps. Now this just has to set up. I think it takes 24 hours for the initial setup, but we're due to have rain pretty soon. So hopefully that doesn't mess this up in its curing process. Here's this window from the inside. The bucks line up with the framing on the inside. Here's the roof and flashing I've been using, and I just flashed around this second window all the way around underneath. This one also has that 5-degree bevel on the outside of towards the outside of the sill. And now I will need to cut. Here's a big window that needs to be cut out here, and a smaller window down at that end, and then all of the loft windows I still have to do. So this is 2 out of 8 windows that are flashed. So it's been rainy the past few days, and I haven't been able to get out here and work. So I just put some plastic over all of these windows. Some of them blew off in the back, but I still need to cut the 5-degree angle on the bottom sill for that upper loft window and this one, and then I'd like to put all the liquid flash around those sides, and then this weekend I can concentrate on cutting 3 more window openings on this starboard side. 2 more loft windows similar to that, and this very large picture window opening, and flash around all 4 of them. I still have that window down there that I made bucks for the other day that still needs to be flashed around. So I have 4 windows to keep busy with this weekend on the starboard side, and just do these 2 upper windows for today, which is Friday. I decided for these 2 other loft windows on the starboard side that I would start cutting on the inside, or from the inside, with a reciprocating saw, and try not to get too close because it's hard to kind of change angle on that thing. So I tried to purposely keep well enough away from the framing of the window as I cut, and then I'll go from the outside on that ladder and I'll use the router to get up close to it. I found that when I used just the router on these windows over here from the outside, not only did it generate a lot of dust I was breathing in, and I didn't have a mask, but it took quite a lot of upper body strength to cut through the sheathing just with the router around the whole perimeter. So even though this reciprocating saw is quite jarring to use, it's still generally less dusty and doesn't require quite as much upper body strength. What I'm doing to get these windows started is I went in and I drilled holes along the perimeter. This was primarily when I thought I would be using the router bit, but it works also for getting the reciprocating saw started. And then I'll start the blade in those holes. So now that all the loft windows are finished and flashed, I moved on to the picture window, got that all cut out, got the bucks all cut and installed for it, got the liquid flashing around it, and now every window is prepped and ready for the next step, which will be zip tape, and then windows. Thanks for watching, folks. Be sure to like and subscribe, and continue to follow along with me on this DIY tiny house building adventure.